Hello, Tom Lavecchia here with the latest edition of the New Theory podcast. Today, we have a very special and esteemed guest, Dr. Robert Sporter of ENT and Allergy. He's out of Manhattan. Dr. Robert Sporter, welcome to New Theory podcast. How are you doing today?
Okay, thanks, Tom, for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well. And you are an allergist by training or an ENT?
I'm an allergist.
You're an allergist by training. Fantastic. So this is a perfect time of year. It is going to be early April.
Yep.
And with all the challenges that are going on with the big C word, things are a little different this year. So give us a little bit about the dynamic of, we've been in more. What challenges are we facing because we've been in more? And then also, what are some of the challenges when we're finally getting out?
Sure. So I think a good way to start that discussion would be just to sort of talk about, the nature of the allergies, at least in the Northeast or most of the eastern side, northern side of the country where we are. We talk about pollen seasons. So we have trees in the spring, grass in the summer, weeds in the fall.
Okay.
So we're getting into tree pollen season, and that typically is the most, I'd say, aggressive in terms of the pollen. Even if people are sort of equally allergic to all three, people have the most problem with tree pollen. It's just a robust pollen season. So for the last couple of weeks, we're really getting to that. It's probably going to increase as we get through April into May. Now, you bring up a good point with being indoors more during the pandemic. People are working from home. And, people often forget about indoor allergens.
Yeah.
A lot of time I'll see a patient or a patient will be referred to me from a colleague and they'll say, well, allergies, it's December. There are a lot of indoor, we call perennial year-round allergies. And the main ones we think about are dust mites.
Yes.
Dust mites are these gross little bugs. They are microscopic. You can't see them. They don't do anything, but just sit in dust and exist. And some people happen to be allergic to them. So if you're allergic to dust mites, that is a problem that typically gets worse when you're more indoors. So frequently I'll see a patient with dust mite allergy. They come in the fall or the winter, although they may have symptoms that are year round. So if you're inside your apartment or your house more, those indoor allergens are going to be more of a problem. Another indoor allergen would be pet dander. So
I got 4 cats.
So you know what that's like, and I don't know if you're allergic, but people who are allergic to their animals are spending more time indoors now. And I'm really seeing patients suffer with allergies and asthma sort of throughout the year, or maybe, patients with indoor allergies, when they get worse, they typically get better when the spring comes, they're not because they're indoors more.
Now, in terms of, so that makes sense, right? The big 2 or 3 molds, pet dander, dust mites inside. Obviously, if you've been inside during the pandemic, you obviously probably have those challenges and would have hopefully sought help or self-remedy over the counter.
Sure.
And then now that you're going out, you're dealing with seasonal rhinitis or seasonal allergies, which presents a challenge. So, what about if you kind of have seasonal allergies? Do you recommend, prophylaxis, preventive, start taking it now when you go out, or should you wait to be symptomatic for seasonal allergies?
Sure. So generally speaking, we say there are 3 things to do for allergies. There's avoiding the thing you're allergic to, taking allergy medication, and doing allergy immunotherapy or like
shots.
Allergy. So, there's not a ton you can do for pollen avoidance. I mean, there are some strategies. Keep your windows closed and shower before bed, and, avoid times when the pollen is higher, typically like around noon, midday. But those aren't super practical because we all have lives and we're trying to do our thing.
Correct.
So that leads us to medications, and medications treat your allergies when you take them. It is better to get ahead of it. Now, for people who have such mild allergies that they really are only bothered on a really bad day, it's okay to take an antihistamine that day. But people who expect to be really miserable from their allergies, I tell people, get on top of it immediately. When you feel the first, and they know, a little itchy eyes, a little runny nose, get on your allergy medicine, stay on it until the end of your allergy season. And usually for spring, we're talking mid-June.
Yes.
Because it's not only the misery from your allergies, it is, if you have asthma, the allergies trigger your asthma. And sort of once you get behind the 8 ball, everything's all inflamed and we can't just turn it off with a couple of squirts of nasal spray anymore.
Correct. So with that being said though, and I don't know if you ever heard this before, the old fashioned, Italian belief was like, if you leave it alone, it'll go away. But like
Right.
allergies don't work that way. So why not? I know we both know it doesn't work that way, but for the audience,
Sure.
why doesn't it work that way?
So, that's just sort of the nature of allergies.
Yeah.
Allergies, different allergies respond differently. So, for example, if you're a 1-year-old and you're allergic to eggs, that's probably going to go away because that's what egg allergy does.
Yeah.
But we're talking about seasonal allergies. People usually grow into them. Do they ever go away? I guess sometimes, but generally they don't. So people who have seasonal allergies or environmental or nasal allergies, they usually stay. And the nature of allergies is that repeated exposure is typically worse. So, for you to say, wow, next spring or, last spring was not as bad, you're probably right. And we see this in other times of allergies as well. The patient who's allergic to a medication, when they have it the third time, it's even worse. Or food. And when we see this with environmental allergies as well. So that's not surprising. And another thing is, the pollens change year to year.
Correct.
Last year was actually a pretty bad pollen season. We had a lot of other stuff going on, but it was a bad pollen season. But generally speaking, the pollen seasons are getting longer and the pollen's getting more aggressive just in terms of sort of changes in pollination and climate and things like that.
And then I know this should be obvious to people. If you don't treat it and you have some nasal symptoms, bacteria loves that. And now you're facing a nasty sinus infection. I'm assuming that probably happens a lot as well, correct?
Yes, that's actually a great point. And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So I have patients who come to see me and I ask them about their symptoms, what their symptoms are. And they often say to me, I get sick all the time. And maybe I have a patient with dust mite allergy and they say, I get a cold every other month. And when I get a cold, it's prolonged and it lasts 3 weeks. And my friend or partner gets sick and they're better in 3 days, but my cold is prolonged. And then it turns into a sinus infection. So first of all, when you have allergies, you are a magnet for colds.
Correct.
Just there's so much inflammation going on in your nose that it's much easier for cold virus to latch on. So that's not your imagination. If you have allergies and you think you get frequent colds that are prolonged, you're probably right.
Correct.
Then you're stuffy in the first place. So it is easier for your blocked sinuses to sort of not flush as well. And then a bacterial infection, then you get antibiotics and you get better, but you're not totally better because you're stuffy from the allergies. So what I see in patients with allergies is this sort of recurrent cycle of colds and sinus infections and nasal symptoms. So treating the allergies with medication or with allergy shots makes people not get sick as much. And that is one of the best benefits of treating allergies because, it's cold, fine, but it's miserable to have a sinus infection and have a cold for a week or two. Obviously, we have other stuff going on right now, but that's a big concern. So when I see patients who come in, they get colds all the time, I'm happy to see them because I know that it's something that I can help them very much with by controlling their allergies.
That makes sense. And then we're dealing in a situation with the pandemic where people are getting vaccinated and the vaccine is super new. And even with the package insert, they tested 40,000 people. Now there's, 4 million. So I'm not going to ask you to super commit, but in general, if you will, whether it be the mRNA technology or whether it be vaccines in general, give us a little bit of like the dynamic of vaccines and how they coexist with, allergy symptoms and so forth.
So I guess you're specifically asking about symptoms after a vaccine?
Well, so I have allergies, right? Seasonal allergies. I'll take my, what is it? Benadryl, not Benadryl, it makes you drowsy. Zyrtec, let's say, and I'll take them as needed. And I don't do prophylactic, right? But I'm lining up for this shot, right? And again, considering mRNA technology is a little different than other vaccines. How should I expect that to play out? Should I stay in my regimen? Should I pause my regimen? Walk us through kind of your general thought, not obviously as for medical advice, but general thought on if I'm getting vaccinated for the pandemic, how does that kind of play out with my tackling of my allergies?
So I guess even before talking about the vaccine, I would say, generally speaking, this is not a time where you want to be sneezing and coughing and have a bunch of stuff.
Good point.
So if ever there was a time to be on top of your allergies, it's now. And this comes up, the parents don't want their kids to go home from school. Let's control what we know is going to be a problem. And then you ask about the vaccine specifically, people may wonder, is something I'm taking going to interfere with the vaccine?
Yeah.
Now, the short answer is, the data is the studies that we have, and these vaccines haven't been around for a ton of time, but they were studied in a variety of patients with all sorts of medical conditions, with all sorts of different medications, and the vaccines work really well. Yeah. So let's not, I encourage patients not to microanalyze this, just kind of do your thing, take your allergy medication, stay under control. One possible caveat for that is I am a little apprehensive to give a patient pill steroids before the vaccine. And I have seen other doctors the same. We don't want to be in pill steroids frequently. They have a lot of side effects. Having said that, we frequently use them for short bursts very safely in healthy young or youngish patients. You come in, your allergies are a mess, you have a sinus infection, you take a 5-day course of oral steroid, no problem in a healthy guy like you. We do it all the time. Having said that, they do reduce the immunity a little bit in a way that it's usually totally irrelevant. But, do I think it's a great idea to give them if they're not really necessary before you get a vaccine? Probably not. For example, I had a patient this morning. I kind of wanted to give her a little oral steroid. It wasn't 100% necessary. She's getting her COVID shot. And I said, you know what, why don't you hold off and let's regroup in a month. And if we need to, we can do it. Now, obviously, if you are on these medicines chronically, talk to your doctor about, that.
Great point. So before we conclude, what's your top 2 or 3 tips? Again, we went through avoidance, medication, and then eventually possibly shots. But what are just some tips in general on how to go into this allergy season before we conclude?
I think you got a good point about getting on your medication early. If every spring you are totally miserable and get colds and the sinus infection, you can't breathe through your nose, and you've already started to get itchy eyes, just take your medicine. Get on a nose spray, take your antihistamine, talk to a doctor, and come up with a plan, because most patients can be well controlled with medication. Yeah. Number 2, if I could give maybe a couple pointers on allergen avoidance that are reasonable, take a shower before you go to bed and wear sunglasses when you go out. If you're going out to the park, keep the pollen out of your eyes. But it's especially important maybe for your kids. So if they've been playing outside all day, throw them in the bath, wash their hair, wash your hair before bed, because you don't want that pollen, which is creating a festering immune reaction, to sort of stay with you when you're sleeping all night. Get it off you. And the third thing is, allergy shots work really well. They are a commitment. You have to get shots every week for a while and every month for a while, but they work really well, especially for spring allergies. And I've had patients who are on 4 different medicines and inhalers and not well controlled, and now maybe they need a Zyrtec in the spring. Wow. So they work really well. I would say this is a big nuisance for people, and it also can flare their asthma and other things, as we were talking about. So see an allergy specialist and get it under control.
Love it. So Dr. Sporter, you're with ENT and Allergy. How can we find you, or how can we find one of the practices?
So our website, entandallergy.com. We have 40 some offices in New York, New Jersey, all over, not only by New York City, but certainly well into the suburbs of New York and New Jersey. So there's probably one close by you. If you're in the neighborhood, you can find us online, book an appointment online, or call the office.
Fantastic. Dr. Sporter, thank you so much for your time. Probably have a ton of patients to see, especially during the season. So the fact that you came on, extremely generous there. Check them out at entandallergy.com. And then Dr. Sporter, thank you for being on the New Theory podcast.
Thanks. Nice chatting with you.